Road noise down.
Oh, good luck.
Right.
Suburbia, stop it.
Oh, I thought you said road noise.
Oh, no.
Alright.
Oh, jeez. Shut up, Miriam.
If anyone wants to drop Alice a text and tell her we're there now, my phone's busy. There's 0 watching. There's birds flying overhead. It's cool, you can see that.
Yeah. Is that online now?
Yeah, we're online now.
Online in 5, 4.
Yes. Oh, we were just talking about Jay and Silent Bob movies earlier. Like, fuck that. Just go back to Wayne's World. Like.
Wayne's World is the only one you need to watch.
Yeah.
The rest of us is like, nah.
Bit of Clerks. Alright, it's been a minute, guys. Sort it out. We're only... It's 8 o'clock on the dot. I feel that was relatively nifty.
Yeah.
Relative. Alright. So hopefully someone will figure this out soon. Or not. Right, we'll give them 40 more seconds, 30 more seconds. After we've been live for 2 minutes, we'll start. So you get the little... There's a little guy here that has like a 0 beside it. And that's like how many people are watching.
And it's how much our friends don't.
To be fair, they were ready way earlier.
My Nana just was quite a lot of my Nana memories is her in the background whipping something. Yeah.
Probably butter and sugar.
Alright, fuck it. We're 2 minutes in. No one's watching. If we stop watching it, it'll happen. Part 8. We're up to page 214, by the way. Which is like progress. Third of the way. And I've caught up this much online. It's going to be like a morning thing because I don't want to study. It's amazing how much routine you can get in your other shit when that becomes a... Oh, it's so good. Oh, it's... give these guys till 3 minutes.
There is one that has. Only one though. I'm afraid.
I've done that myself.
Yeah, I've been there. You sew your pocket together or something dumb, like, fuck. I had one pair of jeans, I was just like, well, that's just like that now. I'll use the other one. It is a one person. Ha 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 ha. I'm not sure how enabled chat is. Welcome to live chat.
What's that?
Frozen banana.
Oh,
Oh god, no, don't push button. Oh. Sorry, I pushed a button. It was all like, push this to learn more about live chat, and it didn't. So I don't think I can see chat now, but hi. Hi, everyone. Hi. So it's either Alice or Mama.
Okay. Oh.
Straight back to school. Part 8. Big day tomorrow. Smooth. I know, I'm just looking at your face though. Sorry we've been late starting, guys. It's been a bit like that. Big day tomorrow. She wondered what that felt like. All her tomorrows were big days. Tomorrow, for instance, she would tackle the living room. Yet, they were not big days. What would that be like? A big day? The only way she could envision such a thing was to imagine going out early, just getting in the car and driving. Oh, driving anywhere. To Manhattan, say, and going to, a museum or on a boat ride around the island. Just not doing her work, letting it go. Not coming home on time. Leaving the kids, letting them fend for themselves. Coming home late as Norm. A little drunk, maybe. Nah, of course, she would not do such a thing. She did not even want to. The kids would be worried, frightened. Norm did his part, she would do hers. She did. Some nights, the conversation ran differently. Norm would come home perhaps a little earlier. He would be in a gay mood. She always recognized, with a little heartful, the occasion. Then, after she'd asked him about his day, he would turn to her with a special sweet smile on his face and say, "And what did the little mother do today?" Mira knew that Norm thought she was a wonderful mother. Not that he said so to her, but she'd heard him say it to other people, and he frequently mentioned it when he was scolding the boys. "Why did you do something like that to worry your mother, when you know what a wonderful mother she is?" He himself had no patience with them. They always seemed to spill the milk when he was sitting at the lunch table with them. They always came home crying about some childhood tragedy on days when he was there to lay contempt on them for it. But somehow, whenever Norm asked her this question, her insides curled up. And he always had that same smile on his face, coy and fatherly at the same time, a smile you would use on a little girl who had just climbed up onto your lap. It always made Mira blush, or at least feel hot in the face. And she'd stammer out something about the price of loin lamb chops, or meeting Mrs. Stillman at the dry cleaner, or the vote to buy Christmas trees for each classroom taken by today's meeting of the PTA. Whatever she said, she would stammer out with the high colour and tongue-tripping of the novice adulteress. But he never seemed to notice. Perhaps he expected her to be nervous when he interrogated her. No WhatsApps, please. Watching this.
She started adulterizing.
No, she's just so guilty and weird about it. It's as if she was covering up something big instead of just the fact she didn't have a big day. Like, she could barely imagine that people would do such a thing, right? Where has it gone? Perhaps he expected her to be nervous when he interrogated her, like the string of young receptionists continually being hired and fired at the office, or like the young women who consulted him whispering about vaginal rash, and who were breathless, blushing, and soft-spoken in response to his shot-out questions. He would listen, patiently, tolerantly to her trivialities, wanting to show his affection, waiting for her to finish. Then he would gaze at her kindly, stretch a little, and say, "Coming to bed?" as if it were a question. Sometimes she would say, "I think I'll look at the paper first," or "I'm not really tired yet." But he would simply put his hand out to her, and she knew she had to stand up, to take his hand, and go to bed with him. She had no other choice. She knew it, and so did he. It was an unwritten law. Maybe it was even a written law. He had rights over her body, even when she did not want him to. Dutifully, she would rise, but something inside her squirmed and squealed. She felt like a peasant girl commandeered by a noble in the droit de seigneur. She felt bought and paid for, and it was all of a piece. The house, the furniture, she, all were his. It said so on some piece of paper. He'd check lights and locks as she stood there, then come back and put his arm around her, and gently propel her up the stairs and into the bedroom. Her reluctance seemed to please him. And she would feel her body moving differently from usual. Sometimes she would see a woman in the beauty shop. Sometimes I'm getting eaten. The bugs.
Put your pants on. Put your pants on.
I'm wearing pants. And these aren't any longer. Bugs. Oh, fuck, this is getting bug. Sometimes she'd see a woman in the beauty shop, sometimes in the street, who moved the way she felt she was moving, as if their hips and arms and necks were borrowed pieces of porcelain that had to be taken special care of, as if they were jewels and belonged to someone else, as if movement did not arise in muscle and bone, but was dictated by some outer music. Such bodies were not connections of bone and muscle, fat and nerve. Like slave girls brought in to dance for the sheik, they were soft, tender skin, oiled in warm baths and perfumed, for him. Their bodies existed only in the eye and hand of the owner, even when he was not present. She remembered seeing Bliss move this way in the days when she had started to sing all the time. Mira had thought Bliss was moving to the music she sang. She did not know how her own movements looked, but they felt like that. Norm always insisted she come into his bed, and he always insisted on using rubbers. Her diaphragm lay drying in a box in her bed table. She would lie there, waiting for him to get it on. He always had trouble with them, already feeling helpless and violated. Then he would lie down and lean toward her and take her nipple in his mouth and suck it until it hurt, and she would push his head away. He assumed that meant she was ready, and he entered her, came in a few seconds, head thrown back, eyes shut, hands on her body but mind 1,000 miles away. And she would lie there, watching him with grim sarcasm, wondering what he was thinking about, what movie star or patient's body, or perhaps just a colour or scent he was imagining. It was over fast, and he never looked at her. He got right up and went into the bathroom and cleaned himself thoroughly. By the time he returned, she had gone to her own bed and closed her eyes and was soothing her genitals into relaxation. He would say, "Good night, sweetie," get in bed, and fall instantly to sleep. She would lie there soothing herself for a half hour or longer until she became aroused, then masturbate for 15 or 20 minutes until she came, and when she came she would cry, hard, bitter tears that she did not understand. For at the moment of orgasm, the thing she felt besides relief was emptiness, an agonizing, cruel, and hopeless vacuum. Over the years, Mira had picked up a little sexual knowledge. Ooh, we've got 2 people. Hello, Alison, ma'am. Right. Over the years, Mira had picked up a little sexual knowledge. She had, for some months, tried to get Norm to make love in a somewhat more tender way, but he was totally resistant to change. He believed that anything other than what he did impeded his pleasure, and that seemed to him wrong, unnatural. The only other act he was willing to perform was fellatio, and that Mira firmly vetoed. On the whole, Norm probably felt that what was pleasant for him was pleasant for her, or if it were not, it was because, like so many women, she was frigid. Mira gave up her attempts to change him, but she sought other ways to make the whole thing less wretched for her. She would try to think of other things, to let him do what he wanted and keep his mind elsewhere. But she was never successful at this, because the moment his head came down on her breast, she was so full of rage that she could not concentrate on anything else. And no matter how short it was, she felt violated and used and will-less, and every month, every year, this feeling grew. She dreaded the least sign of desire in him. Fortunately, these signs appeared less and less often. Fun first chapter! Oh, last page. Yeah, I might put this on a bit. It would be so nice to sit out in the evenings.
How angry you are about it.
I hate them. I always remember the first time we went camping and I hitched back to Nelson before sunset because fuck staying any longer there. Right? This isn't fun with 10 people and I've got more than 50 bites in the last 2 hours. Just fuck right off. I was much fresher back then. It's not nearly as bad now as it used to be, and I don't get the allergic reactions that I used to. They used to be like golf balls on my arms and legs.
At Twisted Frequency, we were right behind the stage with this loud, horrible music one morning nobody was really into, and everybody had a lot of sympathy for us. I was like, oh, what's the other option? Go and drag our sleeping bags somewhere else and sleep on the ground? No, because it's like early dawn and all the sandflies are out, and as soon as you get to ground level, it's just in your face. And then luckily I found a yoga class
Yeah, morning yoga, those things, so good.
That's really good.
Part 9. Things were changing for Mira's friends. Paula and Brett were divorced, and Paula remarried a man remarkably like Brett, only a shade more alive and considerably better off. Roger and Doris were divorced, and Doris was grim and bitter, working in a state office typing out forms all day. Samantha had announced gaily that she was bored and was getting a job. Mira was appalled. The baby, Huey, was only 3, and even Fleur was still really a baby at 6. She put it down to greed. Samantha no longer had dyed her hair, and her cheek colour was her own, but she still walked like a mechanical doll. And things kept happening. Fleur was taken sick at school while Sam was at work, and a neighbour had to care for the child who was running a high fever. Huey, whom Sam left all day with the same neighbour, fell out of a treehouse and broke his wrist, and was languishing for hours in the hospital emergency room before Sam could get there and sign the permission to treat him. Mira pressed her lips together at such news. It was all because Sam wasn't home that these things happened. She had been home with her children as so bad, and they might not have happened at all. She, Mira, would certainly never have allowed a 3-year-old son of hers to play in a tree house. Mira was cool and disapproving whenever Sam called with the latest catastrophe. Sean and Oriane had moved to the Bahamas and bought a boat and were living, according to her letters, the paradisal life of the rich on Sean's inheritance from his father. And Martha had gone back to school. She started part-time, and when she did well, matriculated as a full-time student. She wanted, she said, to be a lawyer. Mira pressed her lips at that too. It was absurd. Norm agreed. By the time Martha finished all her training, she would be 37 or 8. Who was going to hire a middle-aged, novice, female lawyer? She wouldn't even get into law school, Norm assured Mira. Mira believed it. All she had to do was look around her to know it was true. Well, if it amuses her, Mira would say finally, brushing past the real reason for her unhappiness. For few of her friends were available anymore. Everybody was at work, at school, at study, or just gone. She saw them mostly at an occasional evening get-together. Then something happened to end that. It was Lily's idea. She had not been out in ages, she said, and neither had her friends, Sandra and Geraldine. So why didn't they all get together, the old crowd, and all go bowling together? Martha and George, Samantha and Simp, Mira and Norm, Lily and Carl, and the 2 new couples, old friends of Carl's and Lily's. It sounded like fun. They agreed. They sat in the bowling bay, talking when it wasn't their turn, ordering great trays of drink from the bar. Mira was glad to see them. She wondered at Sam, who looked tight and tired, but who bubbled over as much as ever about the latest catastrophe in her household. Simp was suave in his usual slimy, intimate way. He was drinking double martinis at a great rate, but alcohol never showed on him. Martha looked happy. She was tiny and delicate, with skin like porcelain and large deep blue eyes. She looked sweet, which was possibly the reason she so shocked people. "Oh, what a fucking idiot," she was saying, laughing at George. "That asshole. I told him it was wrong, but he wouldn't look. He wouldn't come down and step back and look. He just kept on going like a blind fucking idiot. He stopped when the panel he was about to put up slanted so much it was almost parallel with the staircase molding. God!" She laughed. "Each one had slanted just a little more. I screamed at him, but oh, that man is useless." George sat looking at her without expression, but Sam was uncomfortable with the form of Martha's criticism. Had it been crouched in the usual laughter and in milder language, it would have been a funny story, but there was too much real anger in Martha's voice amid the laughter, and her diction was too strong. Fucking bugs! Oh well, Sam's voice swooned comfortingly down. George is a poet, not a carpenter. Simp had an awful time hanging a lamp, and my father finally had to come over to help us. Remember Simp? She turned to him brightly. Sam, I could have gotten it up myself. It was Huey. He kept picking up the screws and losing them. Oh, Simp. It's true. he almost whined. That kid gets into everything. Well, at least George tries, Mira said stiffly. Norm doesn't even bother. Last week I had to restring a Venetian blind all by myself. Norm sat there watching a football game. Well, he works all week, Mira, Carl said lazily. And what do you think I do? She retorted sharply. And this way, Carl continued, as if he hadn't heard her, he got to watch the football game and your ass all at once. George kept out of the conversation triggered by his inadequacies. He usually kept out of conversations, and when he talked, it was to the women. George worked in an anonymous job for a large corporation. He wrote poetry in his spare time, but never showed it to anyone. He had fixed up primitively some space in the attic, where he kept his collection of mystical books and where he spent most of his time when he was home. They had 2 children and a 9-year-old jalopy that Martha never set foot in without first kicking and cursing. George was considered strange by the men and some of the women. This was because he never stood in the kitchen talking about football and cars. He always sat with the women, sometimes talking, more often silent. He had confided to Mira that he preferred women. They were, he said, more alive, more interesting, more sensitive. They were involved with other people. The men were not. When George did talk, he always hooked the conversation to some mystic doctrine or other. He could talk for hours about the Kabbalah or the Vedas. No one was interested. No one listened. And if that were not enough to disqualify him from manliness, he wore his body like a slippery garment hung on a wire hanger. His arms dangled, his knees dipped. He often looked as if he were about to fall over. Mira thought he was ashamed of having a body at all, and that when he was in his study, he lost it. Yet, George liked to dance and did it well, and he was, Martha said often, a great lover. You ought to try George, Martha said whenever Mira complained about her sex life with Norm. I'm serious, he's good. Mira would gaze at her a little incredulously. She had never heard a woman say that about her husband. Any problems we have in sex are my doing, Martha would insist. The lovemaking is great. I just can't get it off. What about when you masturbate? I can't masturbate. I can't have an orgasm no matter what, and George is willing, God, he's even happy, to spend hours helping me. Nothing works. Think I may go to a shrink. After their turns, Mira and Martha sat down together, apart from the others. Lily's friends are a strange lot, Mira said disapprovingly. Yeah, unusual. They examined the 4 surreptitiously. Harry was short and fat and grey-faced. They had heard that he did something illegal, was a bookie or something, but he didn't fit any movie criminal image they knew. He seemed sad and tired, and lifted his eyelids with effort. Tom was huge, tall and muscular. He looked as if he used his body for heavy work. He was dark-haired, and sat or stood apart from those who were strange to him, glaring out under heavy dark eyebrows. His wife also remained aloof, not near him, but not far from him. She was wearing a pale blue dress, with silver threads through it, made of a sleazy fabric, form-fitting. She had a good body. She had exchanged pale blue satin heels for bowling shoes, but they stood on the floor under the bench, where she'd lain her silver bag. She had dyed blonde hair piled high on her head, and false eyelashes. It was a strange outfit to go bowling in. Lily managed to knock down 3 pins and, sighing, turned and joined Martha and Mira. She sank on the bench. She too was dressed for a party, wearing a satin blouse with her slacks and a rhinestone comb in her hair. That Geraldine is really something, Martha said. Geraldine was short like her husband and a little plump but shapely. She was tremendously energetic. She spoke, handled her ball, and rolled down the alley, all in gusts of strength that didn't seem to end. Yes, she's sexy. She always was, Lily said. Mira looked at the woman intently. What was that? Sexy. What was it about her that made people call her sexy? She was no more attractive than any of them, certainly not more than Lily. Her body was, in Mira's thin view, overweight. She did not wiggle it, or arch it, or any of the things Mira had seen other women do. Yet the men seemed fascinated by her. What's his name? Lily? The big man? Tom? Yes. He looks as if he hates her. The man was watching Geraldine bowl, his face smouldering. Yes, Lily sighed. He's strange. Geraldine is a good kid. She's fun. Alive, you know. Tom is just... Oh, I don't know. They're all from the old neighborhood. Carl and Tom and Harry and Dina, they all grew up together, except Dina's much younger. They're all strange, these men. They all believe in the old ways. Carl is bad, but Tom is the worst. They don't know how to live, those men. They only know how to kill. Harry's okay. He's pretty good to Geraldine, except these mafia types in big black cars keep coming around to terrify her every once in a while. I guess Harry gets in trouble with them. Poor Sandra, she never gets out of the house. Tom keeps her under lock and key. That's why I planned this evening. I thought it would help her, give her a little break. You don't mean he literally locks her up, Mira exclaimed. Well, she lives in a little house in Farmington, miles from stores, and she doesn't have a car. She must have friends with cars. Lily looked away evasively. Yes, I suppose. Geraldine got a strike. She jumped up and down and clapped her hands and turned to Carl with glowing eyes and cried, I'm great, ain't I, Carly? And hugged him and George, who was standing next to him, and ran over to Sandra and hugged her. She pranced over to the three women and flopped on the bench beside them. Did you see that? Her warm brown eyes smiled directly at you. She babbled on happily about her poor bowling, her improvement, and watched the others in their turn, crying with joy at a good score, oohing in pity at a poor one. When it was her turn again, she marched to position, singing, Ta-da! She was, in fact, the center of more emotions than she knew. Everyone watched her, and everyone responded. Samantha envied Geraldine's spontaneity and gaiety, but she did not like the way Simp acted with her. She's desperate, that's what I think. Frantic, you know? Sam appealed to Mira and Martha. Mira agreed, but thought she was also innocent. That's a dangerous combination. I'm a little worried for her. Martha cackled. Christ, what a fool you are. She's a calculating bitch in heat. Oh, she just likes attention, Lily demurred mildly. She's always been like that. She doesn't mean any harm. She's great, Martha said. I love her. But she's still a calculating bitch in heat. The men's response was not verbal. Simp, seeming not to notice that she acted the same way to everyone, slid beside her and insinuated an arm around her, smiling his intimate smile close to her face. Norm held stiffly aloof from her, but his eyes followed her. Carl, too, was distant, but whenever she came up to him, he smiled and put an arm around her. But Tom watched her glowingly, and when she hopped up to him, teasing him about something, he spat some words at her and turned away. Harry sat on the bench smiling mildly and sleepily at everything. Whenever she came up to him, she put an arm around him, or hugged him, or touched him in some way. He remained impassive, but smiled at her blankly. They finished bowling and went into the restaurant for more drinks and some food. The restaurant was a large blank room, with long tables and a jukebox. A bar extended the length of one wall. The place looked poor and not especially clean. Only a few teenagers stood at the bar. Norm curled his lip and glared at Mira. This is the sort of place your friends frequent, he was saying silently. No husbands next to wives, Samantha ordered. It was an old tradition with the friends, adopted in an effort to improve conversation. The group dutifully changed places, although they had been friends for so many years now that the split provided no real novelty. But Tom glowered at Sam. He sat his wife at the end of the table, and himself next to her, beside her next to Lily. He spoke to no one. Mira found herself at the end of the table next to Harry with George on her other side. Geraldine was already on the floor, feeding coins into the jukebox. She danced back to the table. Who wants to dance? Simp jumped up. Other couples followed. Norm led Samantha to the dance floor. Tom and Sandra were left at one end of the table, Harry and Mira at the other. You're different, huh? Different? I'm different too. Oh? I live in a sewer, don't I look it? She gazed at him disapprovingly. I'll bet your husband is a lousy lover. I beg your pardon? I can tell. I can always tell, he said easily, his sleepy eyes sliding around the room, searching for the waitress. He signaled for another drink. He turned back to Mira. You don't have to get on your high horse with me. It ain't worth it. She sipped her drink. Her words had sounded priggish, even in her own ears. She stared down at the table. I'm a lousy lover too, he continued easily, speaking in a soft, foggy voice, barely moving his lips, his face impassive. He was not even looking at her. He seemed to be gazing tiredly into space. Yeah, poor Geraldine. She didn't know. She married me when she was 16. She begged me to marry her, so I did. Poor kid. She had a father that was always beating up on her. She had to get out of the house. I was 25. I'd known her all her life on the block, you know. She has 3 kids now. Look at her. You'd never know it, would you? Just a kid herself. Where did that go? But I can't do nothing for her, not anymore. For years now it's like this. If I'm away from her, I call her up. I come all over the place just talking to her, you know? Just hearing her voice. I don't do anything. It just happens by itself. It pours out all over my pants and down my leg. When I'm with a woman, I can't do nothing. That was a fucking weird sentence. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
That's
quite
yeah.
an admission.
If I was reading that by myself, I'd have to go back over it. Like, what? Just what? But I don't think I care that much about what this fuckwit said.
So when he's away from his wife and he thinks about her and talks to her, he's all like, yeah, I miss you, I love you, I'm so hot for you, I'm masturbating, I'm coming everywhere. It's my favorite.
Oh yeah, I come all over. Yeah, I missed. It's spelled come with an O and an E. Yeah, I could. I'm with it. My mum. Um, the dancers returned when the fucking hate fucking dawn and dusk. Yeah. A little mosquito net tent.
It tastes really yummy.
Yeah, they're not even there.
Irish, no garlic, no marmite.
Yeah, the Marmite helps.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. You eat it. The dancers returned when the music changed to rock. This is how you know it's an uncool crowd. Because what are we in the 50s? We're not quite in the 60s yet.
Yeah.
What was the rock?
Hey,
Buddy.
Animals or something? Buddy Holly?
maybe it's music.
Hmm?
Yeah, rock and roll. It's the 50s.
Yeah, I
they're
might
cool.
have to check out some sweet 50s rock and roll when I get home. Oh wait, vlogs. Ruth been gone long?
No, she didn't just disappeared.
Intermission.
Yeah, I'm all good.
Should we wait for you, Ruth? Okay. So you're not doing the dishes now.
No, I was just rinsing the cake bowl.
That's fair. That's reasonable. Alright, where are we? The dancers returned when the music changed to rock. Simp asked Mira to dance. She stood up instantly. Geraldine was leading Carl in some combination of Lindy and the twist. When the dance ended, Mira pulled a chair over from another table and sat between Martha and Samantha. Harry sat alone at the end of the table, gazing at the wall. Geraldine was riding high. She flew around the room with any partner she could drum up. The pizzas arrived, and everyone but Geraldine began to eat.
Pizza.
Food. How can you think of food? She danced by herself, hovering near the table. Hey, Harry, come on, sweetie. Harry did not turn to her, but nodded his head no. Carly? The music changed to a slow tune. Oh, this is my favourite song, Geraldine exclaimed, near tears. Sandra gazed at her with love. I'll dance with you, Dina, she said pityingly. Tom's large hand came down swiftly on her mid-arm, pounced, and pulled her back hard into the chair.
Whoa.
Ow! She wailed. You sit! He commanded. George stood up. I'll dance with you, baby, he said kindly, leaving his half-eaten slice of pizza. Geraldine pressed her body into his, and they swayed together. More drinks arrived. When the pizza was gone, couples stood to dance. A group of young men in black leather jackets carrying motorcycle helmets invaded the room. They gathered at the bar. Norm looked meaningfully at Mira. She ignored his lowering, but prepared herself to leave soon, gathering her cigarettes and lighter from the table, stuffing them in her purse. Geraldine replayed her favourite song. The other couples sat down. She and George remained on the floor boredly moving, swaying, pressed closely together. Mira leaned forward and tried to talk to Sandra, but Sandra could barely raise her eyes. She mumbled brief answers. Every once in a while, Tom would remove his eyes from Geraldine to check on Sandra, the way one might check a prisoner taken earlier in the battle to make sure he did not start something while the fighting was still going on. The prisoner's hands were tied behind his back and his feet fastened together, and you had thrown him in a corner of the trench. But meanwhile, they were shooting at you out there, and you had to shoot back, and your face was smudged with mud and soot, and was furious and watchful. But you had to turn around every once in a while to make sure the prisoner hadn't loosened his bonds, wasn't just then struggling to his feet, ready to pick up a fallen rifle with bayonet attached and stab you through the back. Although she was looking at the table in front of her, Sandra's eyes flickered every time he looked at her. She perceived it from a corner of her eye. The music changed to a rumba. Geraldine and George were still dancing close together, but now, instead of simply swaying, they were moving their hips together, bumping each other gently, as if they were screwing. Sandra had just mumbled an answer to Martha's question about her children, when suddenly Tom leaped up so fast and hard that his chair fell over, strode across the room, and began to punch George. George put his hands up over his face. Everyone else leaped up. Carl and Simp tried to grab Tom's arms. Samantha cried out, Simp! Your teeth! Watch your teeth! She grabbed Tom's jacket. Tom flailed out at Simp, who ducked. Then Tom pulled at Simp's arm and tore the sleeve right out of his jacket. The women crowded in, pummeling Tom and trying to push him away from George, who was now sitting on a bar stool, with his arms crossed over his crouched head. The bouncer came from behind the bar. He was smaller than Tom, but he was able to grab his arms and propel him toward the door. At the doorway, Tom turned, said something to the bouncer, who did not let go of him. Tom looked back at the table, at Sandra, who was standing paralyzed and white. Get your ass out of here, he shouted. Sandra grabbed her bag and coat and scurried out. He didn't even pay for their fucking drinks, George said afterwards in disgust. End of 9. I see how that event would put an end to the socializing for a while. Shit escalated. Alright, here we go. 10. Shut up. What? There's an actual mirror here.
Oh yeah, I want to sew a hole up in those pants.
Oh, you can totally.
I've got other drapey items.
Probably even. Yeah.
Miriam has
blankets.
multiple blankets. Should I get you a blanket? I will.
Yeah, that would be nice, thanks.
What's
It's probably
nicer
even
option?
getting to the point where the fuckers are fucking off, but God, I hate them.
Where should I look? That blue one.
Oh, blue blanket. Do you hear me? I feel like I'm excluding you, but you should shuffle in.
I'm what?
I'm sort of talking over here and you're like way over there.
I'm
Keep
like,
going.
I don't think you're good.
Okay. Okay.
Because I'm up high. When I go over there, I feel like I'm. Yeah.
You gotta be able to survey us from an adequate fucking. Okay. Born for the stage, yeah. Haven't played me your music yet. I've got
Oh,
like.
yeah. It's because you're radio sister.
Oh, there was like an hour before that.
Yeah. I was eating a snack.
Just say you forgot, like.
Priorities.
Balancing in the wheels. Oh, thank you. So soft. Oh, it's so heavy. Sorry, I just tripped my
Good
finger.
color.
Mm.
Good blanket.
It's
They're
a good
usually
blanket.
weird, dumb colors.
Oh, you look like you've been wet. It's like, yeah, it's that navy purple thing. Violet, like real dark bastard violet.
Pansy purple.
Miriam gave me a pair of velvet pants that colour that she doesn't remember, and I wear them as pyjama pants
Cool.
a lot. They are good.
Alright, where are we? Oh, the hair. 10. Norm tightened his mouth, took Mira by the elbow so firmly it hurt, and said goodnight. She was grateful that the next day, when the phone rang for hours, he was out playing golf. That was it, he had said. He would no longer be involved with such a crude bunch. She argued that it was Tom who was crude, and he was not one of their friends. He refused to argue. He would no longer go to parties, invite, or in any way associate with any of them. That was that. They're my friends, Norm, Mira protested. He looked at her coldly. That's your problem. They're not mine. I go to all your boring doctor dinners, she said almost in tears. My friends are polite and proper. I don't impose rowdiness and riot on you.
Yeah.
If you won't go to their parties, I'll go alone, she insisted stubbornly. You will not, he said in a low, grim voice. She thought about Sandra's face when Tom pulled her down, and thought she knew how the woman had felt. There was no way out from them, just no way out. She would not, of course she would not. He would not permit her to. She was a full-grown woman of 32, but needed permission to do something just as if she were a child. She sat smouldering, feeling helpless. But the next day, when the phone rang, full of explanations, interpretations, and compared notes, she felt herself retreat from all of it. It was too gross. Samantha bubbled on about it with glee and excitement. She had had only one thought, she admitted, giggling. Simp's new bridge work. He had had all his teeth capped in the past year, and it had cost them $1,500. She was shocked at George's cowardice. She felt sorry for Martha. And wasn't that Tom crazy? Lily was full of sorrow for Sandra. Imagine what her life was like, she said. One night, me and her went to a Tupperware party. Oh, it was nothing stupid, but for the stupid housewives. Or stupid for the stupid housewives, you know. There was a chance to get out. So I asked her if she wanted to go, and she worked on Tom, and finally, she came. I picked her up and drove her to my friend Betty's, and they had the party, and when it was over and everyone else had gone home, Betty brought out a bottle and we had some drinks. Oh, we had so much fun. We talked and laughed. It felt so good. Anyway, we stayed sort of late. I guess it was around midnight when I took Sandra home. We walked in the house. We were having so much fun. We didn't want to stop. So Sandra said I could come in for coffee because I was too drunk to drive. And how did you get home? And Tom is sitting there on the couch in front of the TV, and he takes one look at her and leaps up and smacks her across the face so hard he knocked her down. Then he started for me. I ran. He would have hit you. Mira was appalled. Sure, he'd think he was doing Carl a favor. Lily! Oh, that's how they are. You don't know. The old ways, the old neighborhood. Mira told Lily what Harry had said to her. Lily was not surprised. Yeah, poor Harry. He's not a bad guy. We all come out of nothing, you know. Brutality was the way of life. Without it, the men felt like they were nothing, you know. She felt sorry for George, but had a little contempt for him. When you're dealing with people like that, you have to deal in their terms, she said with a grim strength. Sandra and Tom were never heard from again. Harry and Geraldine popped off rather cheerfully once George's face had been cleaned off, and Lily and Carl continued to see them. But Mira was deeply preoccupied by the response of her friends to the event. She mulled it over for weeks. Whatever their opinions, they felt the evening to have been high drama. Something had happened. Something true. It was almost as if she hated to give expression to the thought. They envied Tom his directness. Their own lives were filled with subtleties, subtle power games, subtle punishments, subtle rewards. This Tom might be a barbarian, but there was something clean and clear about his way of proceeding. Only Martha disagreed. Alone of the friends, Martha did not blame George. Geraldine had been coming on strong. George had taken her up on it. He wasn't pressing her. He wasn't abusing her. That was all natural. So Tom has the hots for Geraldine and punches George in a puritanical projection of his own lust. What is George to do? Tom has 70 pounds and many thicknesses of body over him. He defended himself by protecting himself, the intelligent, the non-violent thing to do. Mira hesitantly confessed her confusions to Martha. Her sense that most of the women had enjoyed the scene, had found it revitalizing. Why, do you suppose? Martha had smiled grimly. Well, you ought to know, Mira, she said with sweet acid. Mira stared at her. They see in the relation of Tom and Sandra the truth about their own, the concrete form of their relations with their husbands. Isn't that what you see? Mira shook her head. That was ridiculous. Norm would never strike her, nor was she terrified of him. She went home from Martha's feeling irritable. Norm was right. Her friends had no manners, no grace. Why couldn't they be more acceptable? She really felt Norm had a point. She would have to accept his decree. She decided she would see her friends only during the days. But she didn't want to see Martha for a while. Martha was entirely too bitchy. She would see only Lily and Sam. But even that became difficult. By the age of 6, Lily's son Carlos was pure monster. Oh, this is the one they talked about in an earlier chapter, eh? He'd all climb off her. Yeah. So by the age of 6, Lily's son Carlos was pure monster. He was alternately abusive and almost catatonically timid. When he went to school, his timid side showed. He spoke rarely, did not do his work, and would not even answer the teacher when she spoke to him. But once out of school and back on his own block, he taunted the other children. He beat them up, he called names, threw rocks, rang doorbells, and ran away. His behavior did not improve with age. By the time he was 8, he was known and labeled in the neighborhood. The children his own age, all of whom were smaller than he, ran away from him at sight. Over the years, they had communicated their problem to their older brothers, if they had them. The older children began to retaliate. They would get him on the way to school, for he was always most timid then. They would gang up on him, hit him, throw him down, tear his clothes. He would run home crying. He refused to go to school. Lily, hysterical, ran to the school and asked them to do something about it. She cried to Carl to find a way to stop it. She took to driving Carlos to school and picking him up afterward. But sometimes he had to be alone. One afternoon, he walked by himself around the corner to a candy store to get an ice cream cone. A gang of kids saw him and followed him, and when he came out, they surrounded him. Taunting and jeering, they forced him to walk some distance from his house to an empty lot behind a deserted gas station. They smeared the ice cream on his face. They sent one of their They something about hanging him. I'm not reading it.
Skip a couple of paragraphs.
Yeah, fuck. So, gnarly bullying. Oh, blue lips, fuck.
Do you want me to find a place?
Yeah,
Do you want
go.
to sit down?
Oh, so brutal. I wonder who we lost.
By the time Cal came home from work, Lily was, well, we just missed all the above stuff, but we know what happened. Lily was pacing the house, talking wildly, crying, thrusting her fists at the air, screaming at some invisible enemy who seemed to live in the ceiling. She would stop walking suddenly, raise her face and scream at him. Whoever he was a bastard, he was a fucker, he was a shit. Should I have gone further for it?
Yeah, no, that's alright. I can handle that.
Okay. Carl tried to find out what was the matter, but he didn't understand what...
Could I breathe and not...
Yeah.
think? Cool. Sorry. Thanks for that. Where are we?
Carl tried to...
Alright.
Should I turn the light on?
Yeah, if you want.
Is this getting dark?
It's getting there, but we're not there yet. Oh, yeah, that does help. Yeah, that's good as getting. Ah, it's in your head. What the hell is going on? She did not understand either, but she told him what she knew. Carl tried to steer Lily to a chair. It's okay, Lily. It'll be all right. Come on, sit down. Come on. I'm going to go with the kid was fine, but that was fucked. She sat, but she raved. Carl went to check on Carlos, who was still lying in his bed. He would not speak to his father, but he did not vilify him. He never vilified his father. Carl assured him that Carlos was all right and returned to Lily. Listen, Lily, it's nothing. I did the same thing when I was a kid. Me and the kids on the neighborhood tried to hang some pansy on the block. It was all right, no harm done. Just kids. That's the way kids are. His voice was apparently soothing. I missed that bit. Smoothing, shrugging. It was nothing. Lily got wilder. He shrugged. Kids are rotten, Lily. People are rotten. Nothing you can do about that. He's okay. Lily quieted a bit. She would not look at him. She was still staring out at some malevolent being, but she quieted. As her noise diminished, Carlos perked up his ears. He got off the bed and opened his door. Come on now, Lily. I'll get you a drink, Carl was saying. Carlos slipped down the hall and the steps and sat on a step just out of sight of the living room. His father brought his mother a drink. She sipped it. He sipped his. She was no longer gasping or crying. She was quiet. But listen, Lily, Carl began again. Why did you let him go to the store alone? You know you should have gone with him. And when he didn't come back right away, how come you didn't go out looking for him? Lily began to breathe deeply again. Carlos moved down 2 steps. His large, feeling eyes like his mother's, watched. Carl's voice, smooth as ever, shifted from comfort to complaint. You know the kid has troubles, so how come you let him go out alone? She started to answer. She sat up straight and said, My God, Carl, he's 8 years old. He can walk to the corner store and get an ice cream. He has to. What will he do if he's never allowed to be free? And then her voice rose again and she was off, crying, screaming, tearing at her hair. Carl rose, disgusted. For God's sake, Lily, he protested, but it was useless. Her clamour filled the house. Carlos came down to the bottom of the stairs and watched. He felt satisfied. He had known it was all his mother's fault. Well, that was a brutal chapter. We're not leaving it there, so let's move on.
No, that was all his mother's fault. Let's leave on something nice.
11. At 7:30, Carl called Mira. Could she come over? At the time, she thought he had called her because he simply didn't know what to do. Later, she thought he had called her because he wanted someone else to do it. He wanted to be justified. Lily was pacing and raving when Mira entered. When she saw her friend, she ran over to her, crying, gesticulating, and Mira embraced her stiffly. Then Lily broke away. Her eyes were tragic and earnest. She was trying to tell Mira something. Mira concentrated on Lily's face. She listened, nodding. Lily calmed a little. Mira said, "Let's sit down, and then you tell me." They sat together on the couch. Carl sat across the room. Lily talked and jumbled everything together. Mira would stop her patiently and ask questions. Sometimes Lily would start to rave again. Then Mira would put her hand out and touch Lily's arm lightly, gently. Lily would start and look with terror at Mira, who would then smile kindly and ask Lily to explain again. Finally, Mira got the story, but she still did not have the explanation for Lily's state. "Well, of course you're upset. Some kids tried to kill your child." But that was not it. Lily raved and cried. "Roots! Roots! Roots!" she screamed. "You need roots! But how can you have them when everywhere they try to kill you? I tried to make a home for them in a neighborhood, and what happens? Where do we go now? A strange place. No roots. I need roots." After a long time, Mira began to make some connections. Home, security, terror, and violence were all connected in Lily's mind. The contradictions among them, or perhaps their consanguinity. Being sanguine, so being not sanguine,
Blood.
and the itty of it.
Well, the blood connection.
Yeah,
between-
yeah, it's from sanguine.
Yeah.
I've got the word now. Consanguinity.
And
There's two N's in it, in inity.
I don't think it's a con like a negative. I think it's a con like a together.
Like the Spanish
the
with
blood-
kind of
the blood
con carne.
connection.
Okay. Yeah, the contradictions among them, or perhaps their consanguinity. So the contradictions or the blending.
Mm.
Yeah, gotcha. We got through that. Was driving her mad. Without some place where one can feel safe, where one can sleep, one goes mad. Mira tried to say this to Lily. "So you feel you and your children are unsafe, that you have no place to go, that..." But Lily wasn't hearing. Her voice reached another register. It swirled around them like a noose. She turned round and round and round, repeating herself, unhearing, clamorous, in agony. She was dizzy with her own feelings, her own voice. She was flying around on a carnival machine that would not stop. She could not make it stop, and she screamed and screamed. "Oh my God, let me die. I want to die. Please, somebody kill me. Carl, kill me. Mira, somebody kill me. I can't stand it anymore." She leaped up and ran to the kitchen, Carl and Mira behind her. She had pulled open a drawer and there was a large knife in it. Carl grabbed her. He held her. She was wire and taut against him. She was screaming, "Kill me, kill me, kill me. I can't stand it." After Carl had her, so much for the fucking lighter chapter. I thought,
Yeah.
usually it doesn't shift. Fuck this book. Whose idea was it? "I think," Mira said softly, slowly, amazed at the ease with which she had found the solution, "you had better take her to the hospital." Carl was suddenly in control. It was not until later, much later, that Mira realized this. Yet he probably did not know what he was about. In fairness, that was probably true. The question is, are you responsible for what you do not let yourself know you are doing? Suddenly, everything was different. Fucking suburbia, what is happening? Is that a helicopter?
Helicopter.
Also, the fucking cool cloud thing.
Suburban helicopter.
Oh, it's usually lawnmower engines.
Oh, whoa, that direction. Woo, it's a surprise direction.
Oh, it's gonna come into the screen? Is it?
You got
It is not.
Get well soon.
Enjoy the paperwork tomorrow.
I always say it to ambulances as well.
Hey.
I always talk to ambulances and wish them the best and
It
tell them to drive fast and to get well.
It was a thing back home. I remember as a kid, like lots of people would like make a sign of a cross as the ambulance went past.
Mm.
That's a total thing. Or passing graveyards as well. It's one of those things I've not seen or thought of in a while. But
Sanji and I do the emble dance.
woo!
We just kind of do this weird, like,
This is sweet
Floppy
trumpet, so that was a good like boom. Boom.
Alright, we get through this. This is definitely our last one.
Hi. Ginger and white and black.
Oh, black. Chucky
tortoise.
mixture.
I know now.
That's not tortoiseshell, is it?
Blotchy.
Yeah, it's tortoise.
Is that? It's still when it's like
Orange
big
and
massive
black.
blotches.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, yes.
Yeah, is it still there?
I thought tortoiseshells were grayer.
I thought they were like tiny splotches.
No, there can be big splotches and little
It's
splotches.
more the colours. It's the end of the orange and black.
Ah, I've
And they're
been
always
misrecognizing
female.
tortoiseshells forever then.
They're always
Oh
female.
no, hang on, there's another.
Oh.
I've got a funny feeling there's another name for the blotch ones. I'm thinking, I just can't think of it.
Well, there's
Something in the middle of the night.
Text me right then.
Yeah.
Put it on the page.
Yeah, but they can have a little bit of
Pretty
orange thrown in there, and I
insomniac,
don't know
I'll
if
find
that
out.
makes
Almost
them
there,
count
almost
as
there.
tortoiseshell.
Came into my head and it went away.
There's a really good meditative pose there just for a second. Carl was suddenly in control. It was not until later, much later, that Mira realized this. Yet he probably did not know what he was about. In fairness, that was probably true. The question is, are you responsible for what you do not let yourself know you are doing? Suddenly, everything was different. Carl had Lily's coat in his hands. He had it on her. A moment ago she had been violent, but now she was paced. Do you want me to go with you? Mira asked, anxious. How would he drive and control her at the same time? We can put the kids in the back seat, and I can hold Lily in the front seat. No, Mira, it's okay. It's fine. I can manage. If you just stay with the kids until I get back. I can't. My kids are alone. I'll take them back to my place. You can pick them up there. Sure. Okay. He put his hand on Lily's back, and pushed her gently. Okay, Lily. It's okay. Come on now, he kept saying as he pushed her gently toward the door, and down the front steps and into the car. He treated her as if she were a bomb that might explode indoors. She had subsided. She must have known the moment Carl took control. She must have been waiting for it. She accepted it totally. Meekly, only whimpering a bit, she left and walked down the steps and got in the car. She was sitting hunched over in the front seat when they drove off. Alright, that's the end of that, and I think you'll all agree. That is the end of that.
Well done.
That was
Brutal.
partially fun, largely brutal. I remember violent, brutal bits of this book, but none of them were that. So, yeah, you should check in the chat. Is this Alice or Mum who's left there now? I imagine it's probably Mum because Alice has work in the morning.
Cat, I think maybe Calico.
Calico is
yeah.
like
Because it's white based.
Calico is when the orange. Oh, this is my understanding of it. Is when the orange and the black are more of an apricot and a grey. It's all a bit more pastely and muted. Is my understanding of it.
Good cat
Could be
knowledge
right.
skills.
But yeah. Hey, there's all the chat, just like 3 comes up. The what? What? Hello? Oh, it all just came up now. Is that an Alice there? It's 9:04. What time did those say they do? 8:56, 8:56, 9:04. Hello? Hi, I think. Why did they all come up at once 10 minutes later? That's weird. Oh, you've got to touch the screen to see it? That's a horrible system. Oh, there's a whole bunch of. Oh yeah, we got to a wow. The what? And she's gone. All right. There's